several questions now, but first of all, my words. I wrote something down, and it appears to me you seem like a very nice lady. I noticed you say social a lot, and that's one of my worries is we're becoming a socialist country because you know, government wants to take over health care and car insurance. I mean, the car companies and the banking company industries, student loans, and so this really disturbs me quite frankly, and I know it disturbs a lot of other people. Why is the president why everybody in Washington wants to become socialist?
No, I hear you, and you know I appreciate what you're saying. First, I would say that remember that a lot of what you just talked about happened in the previous administration. The part.
Oh, come on. George Bush is gone.
No,
Stand up for yourselves.
I have to say that if you want the answer, you have to give me the moment to answer. You know, I disagreed with what she said. Excuse me. So I would love to answer you, and as soon as he stops, I will. Okay. The banks, the bailout about the banks, you brought that up, right? That actually was before the new president. That was President Bush. I was there. I know that was. I voted against that bank bailout. Now, President Obama brought it to us again, and I voted against it the third time. So I voted against TARP, what they call TARP, you know, Trouble Asset Relief Program, 3 times, because while I knew that we had to do something, I mean, you remember the headlines. They were talking about a worldwide crash. I didn't think that was the right one. It looked to me like we were just handing over too much money to one individual without any kinds of controls. And I tell you to this day, I think I took the right vote. That it was too much money given to too few people.
You're still voting against, you know,
So,
bailouts and the
right, now let me talk about the second part, okay? So I just told you that came from there. Now, then we did the auto bailout. Now, I voted for that with a lot of reservations about it. But the reason I voted for that was because, number one, there were so many jobs on the line. And not just people working in auto industry, but people working in auto parts and all of the different industries that are associated with it. Okay, and I had a great deal of concern about the jobs. Was I upset with the auto companies? You bet. All right, it was one of those things that, you know, I held my nose and voted because I thought it did more good than bad, but I didn't like being in that position. But the reality was that the government didn't make those auto companies get into trouble. Yeah, well, let me finish. The auto companies got themselves into trouble all on their own. All right, and so it wasn't the government that made them do it. The government came in and tried to help it, but they didn't cause it. So there's a difference. The next part is it really depends. You know, there's a different view about the proper role of government, and I respect a different opinion there. But I do think that when they talk about, and it is there, about the common good, that some of that has to do with making sure that we have a good defense, the best defense in the world. That's government. I mean, that's government. We all pay money for the government, and I think that's terrific, you know, and I vote continuously for that. I also think that there's a role for the government to make sure that our food is safe, and there's a role for the government to make sure that our power grid works around the country. Private industry is important. It's essential, absolutely essential, and they're job creators, but there are some things that also need to be there. You talked about education, right? Education. We will lose our middle class if they can't get educated. And if you ask most families who are facing tuition bills right now if they feel that they can handle that on their own, I will tell you they cannot. They cannot. I put myself through college, so I mean I believe in work. I did, and I will tell you, I put myself. I worked at Wentworth. Yes, but here's the difference, okay? So I'm telling you that I came from that. I believe in that. I worked many, many jobs. I worked in factories around Dover. I worked at Wentworth Douglas. I worked all over the place. I worked in Hampton and Rye and, you know, anywhere I could get a job. And I worked through the school year, and I worked summers. And I was able to pay for the tuition. I had no extra money, none, but I could do it. But if you looked at the tuition today and you sent a 21-year-old out, no matter how hard he or she worked, they could not do that. And the families, I went and spoke to about 1,000 families this weekend who came looking at colleges and also looking for financial aid and how to pay for it. And you know, their worry is deep and it's real. So what we did on that education bill, I assume you were referencing that, the one that we passed in the reconciliation?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's part of my
Okay, here's what we did there. Okay, the way the loans were set up was that banks would lend the money to the student. They would charge a subsidy back for the service to the U.S. taxpayer. Then they had no risk loans. So if a student defaulted, then the taxpayer would also pay that. Now, if the taxpayer is going to pay for a default, and they're also going to pay, you know, then why would they have a bank be in the middle for that? It's extra money. So $60 billion was there. $60 billion. So they took $10 billion of it to pay down the deficit. They put $2 billion into community college. Now, community colleges are full. I mean, they are just bursting at the seams right now for a number of reasons. It's hard for people to go to college full-time or four-year college, so they use a 2-year and then step up to a 4-year if they want to continue. There's a lot of people who have been affected by the recession and are going back for retraining, and they go to a community college. So they're getting $2 billion more to help them do their job. Then the third part of it is because there are so many new people there who are qualifying for Pell Grants, we put more money into the Pell Grants. And then the last part of it was that we upped the amount of Pell Grant money that families can receive. So we took the $60 billion and said the federal government can loan the money directly to the student. They won't have to pay a subsidy to the bank. And in the end, they won't have to cover a bank if there's a loss there. Now, NEEF is in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire Education Systems Foundation, they're wonderful. And they wanted to hang on to servicing the loans. I sit on the Education Labor Committee, and I worked very hard, and they will continue to service loans, because I think it's good for New Hampshire to be able to do that. They know the families, and we know that the rate of failure of repayment is much lower with NEEF than with others. So we did the best that we could, and I think it was a great outcome, a terrific outcome for the taxpayer and for the middle class.
Who's paying for their services? New Hampshire.
They're going to borrow the money and have to pay back the money, but the subsidy
Who's paying for
there.
the services from the New Hampshire Higher Education?
You're talking about NEEF?
Whatever the one you just mentioned.
Yeah, they'll be servicing the loan, and
Who's paying for it?
well,
Who's paying them? They're doing it for nothing?
okay. Next number.